There's a moment in every dynamic with an avoidant that feels like a crack in the sky. It's the moment when you, the one who has always carried the weight, suddenly let it fall. The moment you stop checking their phone, stop reading into their silences, stop bending yourself into shapes just to keep them comfortable. The moment you stop caring whether they stay or go. At first, it feels like surrender, almost like you've lost the fight. But what if I told you that's the very moment the power shifts completely? You see, for so long, the avoidant thrives on the invisible leash. They're not always conscious of it, but they feel it. The tug of your longing, the quiet pull of your care, the energy you pour into holding the connection alive. Even in their distance, they can sense you're waiting. And in a strange, twisted way, it reassures them. They don't have to show up fully because you've already taken responsibility for the relationship. You've already chosen them, even when they haven't chosen you. But when you stop caring, when the cord snaps, it does something they never expect. Avoidants have built their lives on the illusion that love is safest at a distance. They believe that if they withdraw, they can keep control, keep their freedom, keep the upper hand. But when your care disappears, the illusion shatters. Suddenly, they're not the one holding the power anymore. Suddenly, they're the one wondering, wait, what happened? Why doesn't she need me anymore? It's almost paradoxical. The very thing they fear, true intimacy, true vulnerability, comes rushing to the surface when you stop chasing. Because your indifference isn't just silence. It's a mirror. It forces them to see their own absence. It confronts them with the truth they've been running from. That connection only exists when both people are in it. And for the first time, they feel what it's like to be on the outside of the wall they built. So when an avoidant realizes you don't care anymore, it's not just a blow to their ego, it's an earthquake in their reality. Because you've just revealed the one thing they've worked their whole life to avoid. That distance doesn't protect them, it isolates them. And now the game has changed. When that shift happens, when your care dissolves into stillness, the first thing an avoidant feels isn't love. It isn't regret, it's confusion. Because the script they've been running for years no longer works. They're used to being the one who dictates the rhythm, pull away and you follow, go quiet and you lean in, withhold and you work harder. But when the music stops, when you don't rush to fill the silence, they suddenly find themselves in uncharted territory. Think about it. Avoidants build their relationships like a house of mirrors. They give you just enough reflection to keep you guessing, just enough presence to keep you holding on. But those mirrors only work if you're still looking into them. When you turn away, the reflections collapse, and what's left is emptiness. That's what they feel first, the hollowness of a game without a player. For an avoidant, this confusion quickly morphs into something deeper, panic disguised as irritation. They might tell themselves you've changed, that you're cold, that you've become different, but beneath the words is an unease they can't name. Because the truth is, they never expected you to break the cycle. They thought your caring was endless, that no matter how much they pulled back, you would keep the thread alive. Now they're staring into a space they didn't prepare for, the possibility of being left behind. And here's the paradox. Avoidants claim to value freedom above all else. They crave independence, distance, and the illusion of control. But freedom feels very different when it's not chosen. It feels like abandonment. And that's the wound they've been running from their whole lives. The second your care is gone, they're not standing in power. They're standing in the raw ache of their oldest fear, that no one will stay for them if they don't perform, if they don't give, if they don't matter. You might not see it on the surface. Avoidants rarely show their cards. They'll mask it with a shrug, a slow fade, or even an accusation. But behind the armor is the question they can't push away. Why doesn't she care anymore? What does that say about me? And whether they admit it or not, that question keeps echoing. Because for the first time, the control they've always clung to has backfired. This is why your indifference is so powerful. Not because it's a tactic, not because it's a game, but because it's real. You didn't stop caring to get a reaction. You stopped caring because something in you shifted. You finally saw that love cannot survive in one direction. And that authenticity cuts deeper than any strategy ever could. It's here, in this quiet undoing of the old script, that the avoidant's inner world begins to crack. They start to glimpse the truth that distance doesn't equal safety. It equals loss. And the very wall that once protected them becomes the prison they can't escape. And this is where the story deepens. Because confusion and panic are only the beginning. What comes next is something even more revealing. When the avoidant, instead of dismissing you, starts to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they misjudged you all along. When the dust of that first panic settles, something more unsettling begins to creep in: recognition. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Maybe they scroll through old messages and notice the warmth you used to pour in. Maybe they remember the way your eyes searched for them when they pulled away. Maybe they hear the silence now and realize that it isn't heavy with longing anymore. It's clean, final, almost foreign. And this is where the avoidant starts to confront a truth they've denied for years: that your care was never weakness. It was power. Avoidants often misread love as dependence. They see your devotion, your patience, your vulnerability, and they mistake it for neediness. To them, closeness feels like entrapment, so they devalue the very thing they secretly crave. But when it's gone, when you no longer extend the lifeline, they suddenly see it for what it was: a gift they couldn't reciprocate. And that recognition cuts deep, because it forces them to ask, what if I pushed away the one person who actually saw me? This is where the avoidant begins to reframe their narrative. For so long, they've told themselves they had the upper hand, that their distance kept them safe, that they were the strong one, the one who couldn't be hurt. But when you stop caring, their supposed strength feels like a shield with nothing behind it. The silence exposes what they were hiding all along, the aching truth that they longed for love, but never believed they could sustain it. It's a humbling realization, and it rattles their sense of self. They start replaying conversations in their head. They remember the times you asked for more, the times you named your needs with tenderness, the times you tried to draw them in, and suddenly those moments don't look like pressure. They look like opportunities they squandered. And the weight of that lands differently now, because for the first time, they see you as someone they could actually lose. Here's the twist. Recognition doesn't always lead to action. Some avoidants bury it deeper, convincing themselves they don't care either. But even in denial, the crack remains. Once they've glimpsed the truth that your love wasn't a chain but a choice, they can't unsee it. And whether they admit it or not, they feel the sting of realizing they might have underestimated you, misread you, even misjudged you. And that's why this phase is so powerful. Because it's not about whether they come back or not, it's about the shift in your position. You're no longer the one waiting for validation. You've become the mirror they can't escape, the presence that forces them to confront their own absence. And in that recognition, you've already changed the story. If this is landing for you, subscribe. We're just getting started. Because what happens next when the avoidant tries to reconcile this recognition with their old defenses is where the real transformation begins. Recognition is a dangerous thing for an avoidant because it collides directly with their oldest defenses. When they feel that pang of loss, that creeping awareness that maybe they misread you, their first instinct isn't to lean in, it's to double down on the very walls that kept them safe. They tell themselves you're cold now, that you've changed, that you're no longer the person they fell for. They project blame outward because turning inward feels unbearable. But the truth is that projection is shaky. It's not built on confidence, it's built on fear. And so they start to oscillate. One moment, they convince themselves they don't care, that they're better off, that freedom feels good. The next moment, they find themselves checking your social media, replaying the way your voice used to soften when you said their name, wondering who you're laughing with now that it's no longer them. It's a push-pull, but this time it's happening inside them. This oscillation is what makes your indifference so disruptive, because it flips the dynamic. You used to be the one cycling through hope and despair, waiting for scraps of connection, wondering if the distance was your fault. Now it's them pacing in their own head, torn between their instinct to retreat and their desire to re-enter your orbit. And the more they wrestle, the more they realize something they've never wanted to admit. They are not immune to loss. Here's the irony. Avoidants spend so much of their lives avoiding dependency, avoiding being too affected. But when your care vanishes, they discover a dependency they can't deny, not on you, but on the comfort of knowing you were always there. And when that comfort evaporates, it shakes their identity. Because if they're not the one calling the shots, who are they? If their silence no longer controls you, what power do they actually have? This is where some avoidants make their first clumsy attempt to re-engage. It won't always look like a grand gesture. It might be a casual text, a just thinking of you out of nowhere, or even a subtle attempt to trigger your response by pulling back again, just to see if you'll bite. But underneath the surface games is a nervous question they don't want you to hear. Do I still matter to you? And here's where your role changes. Because now the choice isn't about whether you can win them back. It's about whether you even want to play the same game anymore. Their oscillation highlights the very instability you once blamed yourself for. But this time, you see it for what it is. Not a reflection of your worth, but a symptom of their fear. And once you see that, you stop chasing certainty from someone who doesn't even have it within themselves. This collision of defenses and recognition is the turning point. Because what comes next is even more revealing when the avoidant realizes that their usual strategies, the silence, the withdrawal, the hot and cold dance, no longer pull you in but push you further away. When the avoidant finally recognizes that their usual playbook no longer works, it shakes them to their core. Their silence used to be a weapon. Their withdrawal used to keep you reaching. Their detachment used to feel like power. But now, when they pull away, nothing happens. When they go quiet, the silence stays silent. When they test the waters with inconsistency, they're met with indifference. It's disarming, almost humiliating, because for the first time, their old tools don't bring them the control they're used to. Avoidants build entire relationships on the unspoken assumption that you'll keep trying, that no matter how far they retreat, you'll stretch yourself to bridge the distance. But when you no longer do, the script collapses. They're left standing there, holding tactics that suddenly look childish, powerless, even transparent. And here's what's fascinating. Many avoidants don't even realize how much they relied on your pursuit until it disappears. Only in the absence of your care do they see how much it propped them up. This collapse of control often triggers one of two reactions. Some avoidants retreat even further, hoping that doubling down on their old defenses will eventually pull you back. They cling to the illusion that if they just hold out longer, you'll break first. But as the days stretch into weeks, that illusion crumbles. They start to feel the sting of being irrelevant, of not being able to penetrate your stillness. Others, however, move into a space they never expected, vulnerability. Not the soft, open kind you may have wished for during the relationship, but a raw, unsettled vulnerability that seeps out in clumsy attempts. They might reach out with strange timing, send a nostalgic message, or suddenly act curious about your life in ways that feel jarring. It's their way of testing the water, but underneath is a sobering truth. They no longer feel in control. And this is where the power dynamic flips completely, because you're not sitting by the phone anymore. You're not dissecting their every word, searching for hidden meaning. Instead, you see the cracks in their armor and you understand something profound. The avoidant never had the power. The power was always in your willingness to care, to give, to stay. Once that willingness shifted, the illusion of their control dissolved. It's important to pause here and really take that in, because so many of you listening have lived through years of believing you were the powerless one, the one at the mercy of their moods, their distance, their silence. But the truth is, the relationship only existed because you kept showing up for it. And when you stopped, their old strategies fell apart. That realization isn't just liberating for you, it's destabilizing for them. So when an avoidant realizes you don't care anymore, it doesn't just wound their ego, it dismantles their identity as the one who could always keep love at arm's length. And from that rubble, a new truth begins to emerge. If they want connection, they can no longer rely on distance to preserve it. Send this to someone who's been stuck in this dynamic for far too long. Because what happens next? The way an avoidant wrestles with regret and the strange ways it begins to surface will give you a clarity that changes everything. Once the scaffolding of control falls apart, something begins to seep in that. Avoidants spend their lives running from regret. It doesn't arrive like a tidal wave. It's slower, more insidious, like water finding its way through cracks in the wall. At first, it shows up as a flicker of memory, a moment they dismissed, a kindness they shrugged off, a softness in your eyes they turned away from. Now, in the emptiness, those moments come back to haunt them. Regret for an avoidant is complicated because it's tangled up with pride. They don't like to admit mistakes. They don't like to feel exposed. So the regret doesn't always sound like, I should have loved you better. More often it sounds like, why didn't I appreciate her when she was there? Or did I push too far this time? It's less about admitting fault outright and more about wrestling with the nagging sense that they miscalculated. And the miscalculation cuts deep, because avoidants are used to thinking they can step back as far as they want and you'll still be there when they decide to return. They've built their relationships on the illusion of endless second chances. But your indifference forces them to confront the truth. Second chances are not infinite, and this realization unsettles them in a way nothing else can, because it proves that love doesn't wait forever. You may not see the regret clearly because avoidants rarely show it openly. Instead, it leaks out sideways, a random text at midnight, a question about your family, your job, your well-being, things they barely asked about when they had you. A sudden like on a photo you posted weeks ago. These gestures might look small, but they're not about the photo or the question. They're about testing whether the door is still open, whether they still matter enough to spark your attention. And here's the most ironic part. The regret they feel now is the same regret you begged them to avoid when you were with them. You asked them to show up, to appreciate you, to love you in the present, but it's only in your absence that they begin to see what your presence truly meant. That's the avoidance cycle. Love is clearest to them only in hindsight, when the chance to live it has already slipped away. For you, this is a pivotal moment, because when their regret starts to show, you finally understand something you couldn't before. Their inability to love you fully was never about your worth. It was about their fear. And seeing their regret, whether it leads to action or not, becomes the proof you didn't know you needed. Proof that you weren't asking for too much. Proof that your love was valuable, powerful, unforgettable. And this is where the deepest shift begins. Not in them, but in you. Because their regret gives you something far more precious than reconciliation. It gives you clarity. Clarity that the love you offered was real, that it mattered, and that it deserved to be met in full. What comes next is perhaps the most transformative part of this journey, when their regret collides with your newfound clarity and you realize you're no longer bound to their cycle at all. When regret meets your clarity, everything changes. Because for the first time, you're not caught in the undertow of their emotions. You're watching it from solid ground. You see the pangs of their regret, you hear the echoes of their confusion, but you don't mistake it for love anymore. You recognize it for what it is, the consequence of their choices, and that recognition is powerful because it unhooks you from the cycle. Once upon a time, their regret would have pulled you back in. The late-night messages, the sudden tenderness, the breadcrumbs of attention, you would have clung to them, hoping they meant a breakthrough. But now you see the difference between regret and responsibility. Regret is about them. Responsibility is about you. And until they can cross that bridge, their regret is just a shadow of what could have been. This is the liberation most people never expect. Because you didn't get here by forcing change in them. You got here by shifting within yourself. Their regret may stir sympathy, it may stir a flicker of what if, but it doesn't stir your old desperation anymore. Because clarity has given you something stronger than longing: choice. And in that choice, you see the dynamic for what it always was. Two people playing different games. You were playing for connection. They were playing for control. And now you're done playing altogether. For the avoidant, this realization is devastating because the power they thought they had is gone. They can't lure you with distance. They can't bait you with silence. They can't reel you back with half-hearted effort. Your clarity has broken the spell, and in that break, they're forced to face themselves in a way they never imagined. Not because you punish them, but because you no longer participate. And here's the most profound part. Your clarity doesn't just shift the relationship, it shifts your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who wasn't enough. You stop carrying the burden of their emotional unavailability. You stop mistaking inconsistency for mystery, and you start to embody a new truth that your love is a gift and not everyone is ready to receive it. So when an avoidant realizes you don't care anymore, yes, it unsettles them. Yes, it triggers regret. But the deeper story is about you. Because their regret is no longer your prison, it's their reckoning. And your clarity is no longer fragile, it's your freedom. And from this freedom, you begin to ask different questions. Not will they come back, but do I even want them back? Not what did I do wrong, but why did I stay so long with someone who couldn't meet me? And these questions don't chain you to the past. They unlock your future. Because the truth is, the final shift isn't about their realization at all. It's about yours, that your power was never in their hands. It was in your ability to withdraw your care, to stand in your clarity, and to choose yourself. There comes a point in this journey where the story isn't about the avoidant anymore. It's not about whether they regret, whether they reach out, or whether they finally see what you always offered. The story becomes about you, about who you've become in the space where you no longer pour your care into someone who couldn't hold it. When an avoidant realizes you don't care anymore, it may shake them, it may humble them, it may even awaken parts of them they've buried. But the most powerful awakening is yours. Because you see, for the first time, the cost of waiting for someone to value what was already priceless. You see that your love, your effort, your devotion were never weaknesses. They were your strength. And now that strength is no longer spent trying to pull someone out of hiding. It's spent standing in the fullness of yourself. This clarity is not coldness. It's not bitterness. It's not shutting down your heart. It's the opposite. It's realizing your heart is too precious to waste on half love, on maybes, on someone who only feels the weight of you when you're gone. Clarity says, my love is sacred, and I will no longer hand it to those who treat it like a burden. And here's the quiet power of that. The avoidant may circle back. They may reach out. They may confess regret. They may even try to rewrite the ending. But this time the choice is yours. Not from a place of desperation, not from a place of hoping they'll finally change, but from a place of sovereignty. You get to decide whether their presence adds to your life or whether your path is already leading you somewhere far greater. So, if you've ever wondered what happens when you stop caring, let this be your answer. It's not just about what it does to them, it's about what it does for you. It frees you. It awakens you. It hands you back the pen to your own story. And maybe that's the question to leave you with tonight. If you no longer had to bend, wait, or chase, who could you become in love? What kind of partner, what kind of life, what kind of future would you create if you stood fully in that freedom? If this resonated with you, subscribe. Not because you need more answers, but because you're already on the journey of reclaiming yourself. And the deeper you go, the more you'll see the moment you stop caring about proving your worth to the wrong person. You start living as the woman who was worthy all along.